Endless Dungeon. It is a very different thing for Amplitude, but not something that you haven't done before. Obviously, Dungeon of the Endless in the past, but it's been quite a while since Dungeon of the Endless. So I want to start by asking, what spurred the desire to go back and do something new in the after Dungeon of the Endless?
Let me do, okay. Well, it really was a passion project when it happened. And Arthur was one of the lead members back then as well. And it was so different from the other games we've done, that it really was kind of special to us. But our bread and butter is sort of the 4X. So we keep doing 4X has been in the back of the mind as always. Dungeon, it was really fun. As devs, people, you do a 4X, a second 4X, a third 4X. They're like, can we do something else? So the whole team, sort of wants to change. As strategy gamers and gamers, all the devs really enjoy playing Dungeon of the Endless and that sort of thing. So finally, it came to the point where we just got together and said, all right, let's see if it's worth revisiting. Because we didn't want to do like copy paste, call it 2, release it 8 years later, charge money. That's not our dev style.
It's not fun.
Yeah, it's also not fun. That's a good point. So
yeah, I think we wanted to try a new blend of genres, and really it's come to the fact that when you let player play the game for the first time, Dungeon of the Endless, you have a very big step with the controller at first, and you have a lot to understand, and we really wanted to try to find a more accessible formula, but still keep the roguelites toward defense part of the first of Dungeon of the Endless. So from that, we changed for direct control, because like that you have a lot of interaction, way more accessible, intuitive. You just have to press A on something to do something with your character. It's way more intuitive. And after that, obviously, we had to change a lot of things because all the actions were real time. So you had to reduce the size of the dungeon. So because of that, we wanted to move the action with the crystal, etc., etc. So a lot of change after that were we tried.
yeah, once the decision was made to move away from the sort of board game style almost of the first one, once you go with the reduced camera, the zoom in of the dual, the dual stick, it necessitates so many changes in the design of the original game. So really, I mean, you can only call it a spiritual successor, right? Because we want to keep the style, the challenge is the same, but it's
some iconic elements of the still have
Yeah.
the crystal, the team of heroes, and the ambience,
the atmosphere, the mood, all that kind of thing. Yeah. Sorry, that's a really long answer to your question.
All right. We're coming up on nearly 8 years since Dungeon of the Endless came out. Like, over the course of that time, was there a design doc, or was there a list of things that you wanted to pursue since Dungeon of the Endless, things that you couldn't do when the original game came out, that you were just keeping in your back pocket until now? Or like, was this kind of spur of the moment where like you guys decided on the project and then started looking back at the original and seeing what you could improve upon?
Yeah, exactly. I have that in my mind, at least since the first one. Totally. The really the one of the thing that was the fact that I wanted this game to have a first layer of strategy way more accessible, and that's for example damage type in this endless dungeon. Something that's the player will immediately understand that you have like blue monsters and you have to use electricity on them. And just with the first layer, you tell the player there will be strategy choice and push the game. Then obviously, like in the first one, you can always find a new way to optimize your play style, your building, etc., etc. But that's one of the things I wanted to have something that you can immediately understand as a strategy choice. And obviously, as I was saying during the Q&A, we really wanted to make a rewarding meta progression, something that give you
Yeah, the little rewards, the
Yeah.
little bonuses to sort of
Restart.
keep you interested.
Yeah. And I have different runs because sometimes the first one can be a bit repetitive, and in this one we wanted to have a lot of way to change the adventure that you will have in your next run. So, for example, you have different paths. You will discover different monsters and not the same districts over and over in the same order. And obviously, with the hero to have more combinations between them, things like that.
And I believe I heard it mentioned during the presentation that this game takes place after Dungeon of the Endless, but before Endless Space 2. How did you decide where you wanted to put the timing of this particular game as far as like the lore, the story, what's going on in the Endless universe?
Yeah, that's this is a thing that we've had to start working a lot on in the last couple of years because for Endless Space 1, it was like, we created the universe, but there were no dates. It was like there were these guys, and a lot later there were these guys, and then like towards the end it was all these other guys. And literally that was sort of like, the timeline of the universe. But now we've done, we've had 4 games, and there's a 5th game in the, plus other stuff we've done in between. The timeline, is getting so hard to keep everything straight in our heads and with our documentation. We actually had to sit down, create a timeline of the universe, start putting dates on things and that sort of stuff. And so once you do that, then it becomes, then you're sort of like saying, well, okay, what factions do you want to have present? Because maybe there's some factions that were in Dungeon of the Endless, and we might want to have some of those as like coming back for the fans, but we can't really if we move it too far forward in the timeline because Origa dies in ES2. So there's once you start messing with a more fixed timeline, you have less and less choice. But we needed that. We needed that. We needed to actually really codify things a bit. So once we did that, and once we took all the elements we wanted to have in the game, the actual window of possibility wasn't all that huge. So that's basically how we ended up choosing that is by just it just became an output of starting to record and formalize previous stuff in the canon.
That's a very
Not a very
interesting thing.
sexy answer.
Yeah. That's a very interesting thing, though, that that y'all finally just put a timeline to this entire universe, and I'm curious, like, has that helped with the Endless universe and franchise as a whole? Like, do you feel like that's gonna benefit y'all not just here in Endless Dungeon, but in further games if you go forward?
Yeah, I think we're kicking around doing various things in the universe because we're having a lot of fun with it. And so the thing is, every time you talk about, well, we could do like something like this or something like that, then the question is, okay, when do you do it? What factions do you want? Oh, I want this faction and that faction. Well, you can't. So and in a way it's unfortunate because you lose flexibility, and that's one of the reasons we never codified anything, is we didn't want to get nailed down. But now we have to. We're grown-ups. We have to realize sometimes there's limits on what you want to do.
And our friends are so precise about things.
Oh
they
Yeah.
have all the hypotheses and things like that. So if we are not respecting the canon of our universe, it just fell apart for them.
Oh,
So,
we hear it. Yeah.
so obviously we don't want to to make them sad.
Yeah, no, we don't want to break their hearts, and it's great. I mean, it's nice having a community that cares about that, and
So many great videos on YouTube about things that we don't even think about complot.
yeah, right, conspiracies and things like that. And yeah, that's funny.
And y'all's bread and butter for like the longest time has been strategy. But and even in as you mentioned in the original Dungeon of the Endless, it's more of like a board game style compared to where we are now. Have there been any elements of strategy or certain mechanics that y'all had to shed as you approached this more action oriented style for Endless Dungeon?
Arthur knows much more about this than I do. My initial reaction is the size of the level. because the levels in Dungeon of the Endless could actually get pretty big, and you're mapping all your choke points and powering rooms, and and because you just can't have a scope that big, particularly if it's multiplayer. Because if you try to have 3 guys on a couch with 3 controllers and the dungeon, it's just forget it. So that there's a huge impact on that I really notice.
Yeah, I think we need to rethink the level design of the level, and that's why we break it into piece with the zone things. And so you have to change zone regularly to keep the action, in fact, compact around the player and around the crystal. And that's also why we change the way to move the crystal to give you more freedom in this area and let you decide where you want to go. It's not very visible in this first build and the first zone of the first build, that you will be able to choose a bit your passing in the station, and that's a way to adapt to the fact that we have direct control and that everything should be done in real time, controlling your character step by step inside the.
Because what happens in Dungeon of the Endless is you can explore a level, and it can end up pretty big. And the last thing you do is you pick up the crystal and run. And that's how you move the crystal to the next level. And that worked great because it's like, you spend all this time setting everything up, getting it. It's like, all the monsters are coming and the tigers are shooting, But, that's just too big. So Arthur and his team came up with this idea of, we want that experience, but we're going to have it in smaller bite-sized pieces until you do get to the end of the level, and then you have the transition point. And that, and that's, so it's really the same idea of the tower placement and the strategy and the resource management, but you're doing it on more smaller scales.
Why 3 heroes in particular, as far as the squad composition goes?
Try more. We play a lot with 4 heroes and 4 players. It was just too much for this game, for this formula. You didn't really have the ability to follow all the actions, because obviously in the first one you can really easily move your camera to the entire space, and you can give orders if you're in solo mode, and just build turrets in some place doing at the same time you have your heroes in another. And so it was easy to have 4 heroes and even 4 players, but in this game it's just too much. And so we reduce it to 2 when the player will discover the game. In solo they can only play 2 heroes, then 3 heroes when they will be a bit more advanced, and 3 we wanted to keep some kind of balancing also between the solo mode and the multiplayer mode. So we ended with having 3 players in the crop mode.
I think what's really fun in the solo mode is the whole chess kind of strategic layout, tower defense, path planning. Where am I? I'll put this hero who's really good there, and they can back up these towers and stuff in case the monsters come this way. That's where the fun is. I think for me in solo, the fun in multiplayer is yelling at your friends because you have a shared resource pool. It's like, what? You used all the food? I need the food. Oh no, here come the monsters. Where did it get over there? You should, I mean, that's kind of the fun in the multiplayer, right? But you can't do that with 4. It's hard to do that with 4 people in this size of a map and try to keep track. It just got too confusing, too complicated. So I think one of the main reasons we went down to 3 was just for the manageability of the multiplayer. It wasn't even technical. It really was just pragmatic.
We've mentioned a couple times that there's going to be single player and co-op features in this game. How are you all handling different progression per player? Like, does everybody share the progress? Does everybody share the rewards? Or how is it going to be set up to where, like, to make sure that every player gains from each run?
It's very more like the spirit. I will answer the spirit of what we want to do, and I can assure that it will be like that in the final game. But what we want is obviously to have everybody ready for time, but to simplify because we have a lot of narrative and objective quest, etc. It's not that easy. So the approach is to have the story and the content of the hosts, So when you go in the station of a player, you will play the game as it is for this player, and for example, for the quests. But everybody will receive a meta money. That's for sure. And also, sometimes you will unlock specific thing just for you as a player, as a guest or as a host. Everybody will have a meta reward, but not necessarily the same, because it will follow your own unlocking progression. So, for example, if somebody hasn't this particular blueprint, and you have already it, you can have another reward to compensate the fact that you already loot this specific blueprint. It is still a work in progress, but it's the idea that we have been.